Secret of the Mimic has just given us some insanely important context to 5 of the remaining mysteries from Security Breach and its DLC, Ruin. So today, we're gonna look over all the new evidence we've gotten about Edwin and Murray's costume manor to finally solve this mess of a game once and for all. Speaking of mess, the pizzaplex is huge, isn't it? With so many different locations and secrets, new theories are popping up about this mall almost every day. Well, what if I told you that thanks to Secret of the Mimic, we can unravel the meaning behind some of the most mysterious rooms in the pizzaplex? That is mystery number 1 for today. It all starts with something Evan Lampy, the creative director for Secret of the Mimic, told Dawko in their interview just before the game releases. Here's the clip.
And so, like, early on, we said, okay, well, how big is this map compared to Security Breach? And we overlaid them, and the entire footprint of the facility could fit into Roxy Raceway.
Oh,
which
wow.
I thought was hilarious.
He casually mentions that Secret of the Mimic, the entirety of Murray's costume manor, could fit inside Roxy Raceway. And that word choice is no accident, because after playing through the game again and paying attention to all the details and the set design, Murray's costume manor does fit in Roxy Raceway. Because it is in Roxy Raceway, or rather, Roxy Raceway is constructed on top of the remains of Murray's costume manor. This is actually why the Mimic is in the sinkhole under the raceway. Gregory wasn't lying. It has been down there a really long time, since the events of Secret of the Mimic, or shortly after, with whatever we'll see in the Secret of the Mimic DLC. There's a theory floating around right now called Fazburger, which explains the general gist of this, but I went back through Security Breach and Ruin and found a few more rooms that are a dead hit for rooms in Murray's costume manor. So let's go through those so we can solidify that connection as unshakable. Here's the first one. At the very end of Secret of the Mimic, if you select the parachute ending, Arnold will make his way to the Welcome Show stage, where he activates the elevator. It's a giant circular platform with a button sticking out of the ground that you press, and upon pressing it, the circular bit of ground you're standing on begins to sink into itself, creating an elevator that you fall into. And as you go deeper, the ground above you seals shut. It's oddly similar to the main stage elevator from Security Breach. You find this circular platform, press a button sticking out of the ground, and you fall into the ground. And if you return later, you can see that it's sealed shut. The Secret of the Mimic one leads you directly to R&D, and the Security Breach one leads you into the basement area, parts of which are labeled R&D. This is a dead ringer for the same elevator. It seems like a one-to-one renovation. The only problem is that this elevator is not in Roxy Raceway. It's actually pretty far away. Luckily for us, there's a pretty good explanation for that, but there's no time now because as we round this corner, we enter a basement-like area with several cement pillars connecting the ceiling and floor. A match for the Tiger basement area, but not only that, we also have this huge area under Roxy Raceway, with cement pillars that are more to scale with the Tiger basement that we see in Secret of the Mimic. You can see it's this giant dark area next to the elevator we used to go find the Mimic, and all around are giant gray cement pillars under the raceway, like a basement. This is the basement from Secret of the Mimic. There's more. In Ruin, after we get out of that elevator, we pass through a beautiful cave into a strange hallway-like area that seems quite old. It's long, narrow, and has a bunch of shelves that we have to take twists and turns through to get to where we need to go. Along the way in this weird hallway are doors on either side that are blocked off by a bunch of junk. After giving it some thought and comparing the maps, I feel this is a dead ringer for the main storage hallway in Secret of the Mimic. with similar twists and turns through shelving and different doors on the side that would have led you to areas in that game. It's another familiar room tucked under Roxy Raceway. For our next location, let's exit the manor and with it Roxy Raceway, because later on in that Secret of the Mimic ending, we drive in a little car with Mr. Helpful up to Murray's house, and along the way, we pass through a giant silo filled with vats of molten metal. This area in particular made light bulbs go off in the heads of myself and fellow theorist Gibby's Horror Homestead, because this area is a giant silo, reminiscent of the giant sticky note silo in Security Breach. That infamous sticky note room is also located inside a tall silo that the player can climb. Similar shape, similar proportions, again, in the belly of the pizzaplex. Even just with these handful of locations, the welcome show elevator, the White Tiger basement, the main storage hallway, the molten metal silo, and of course things that have already been called out, like the scooping room and the giant Freddy head under the pizzaplex. Secret of the Mimic is clearly trying to tell us something important, that although it may have burned, Murray's Costume Manor is by no means gone. It's still lying here, deep underground, where memories sleep. But here's the thing, some of the locations I just mentioned don't quite slot in where they should. The welcome show elevator, it's not in Roxy Raceway at all, but on the main stage, which is actually quite far away. And the storage room, though you navigate through it very similarly to the storage room in Secret of the Mimic, it's below the White Tiger basement, above by the elevator, which is obviously not how that should work if this is a 1-to-1 scale of the Murray's Costume Manor map. If this really is all Murray's, why is the map strewn about in this way? There's a few explanations for this. Option 1, whatever caused the giant sinkhole and the land to sink into itself around the pizzaplex also caused the Costume Manor to topple over into open ground. So certain parts of it are in different places than they'd normally be, because they've been falling down slopes. Option 2, we know that Scott Cawthon wasn't entirely communicative with Steelwool during the development of this game. He himself has admitted there's plenty of mistakes, so the way these rooms are ordered could be one of those mistakes. And Option 3, which has some in-game evidence to it. In-game evidence taking the form of mystery number 2, the Help Wanted recreation rooms. Recently, I hopped on a live stream with my friend Gibby's Horror Homestead, and we were covering a FNAF iceberg. On that iceberg, one of the entries was talking about how in Security Breach, there's a bunch of rooms that recreate sets from FNAF Help Wanted, an in-universe video game. And that's odd, because the Pizzaplex is a real location in universe, and was created after the Help Wanted game came out. So the timeline there didn't make a lot of sense. Because of that bizarre detail, we decided to put a stop to the iceberg for the day and actually hop into Security Breach to get a look at these rooms. And there they were. The Plush Baby Flashlight minigame, the Curse of Dreadbear lobby, the Build-A-Mangle minigame, the Mangle Vent Repair minigame, and the Foxy Repair minigame. Areas that, when you line them up side by side with FNAF VR, are unquestionably homages to those respective games. The problem is, these shouldn't exist. All of these locations are guarded by a gate that only the animatronics have access to. Furthermore, they're all in the basement area, where we found most of our secrets so far. So, if these rooms were truly homages to the VR game for the benefit of the customers, it makes no sense for them to be guarded by gates and for them to be in the basement, an area where customers can't possibly get to. They're so out of place and so detailed for seemingly no reason. And to make matters worse, outside many of them, if you glance at the wall, you'll see the letters R and D. What the fuck is going on? Alright, let's take a step back and list what we got so far. Not only do we have an elevator and basement areas that take us down into areas labeled R and D, but these areas also contain literal mimicries of rooms from previous franchise entries. So Gibby and I used our massive brains to mash these facts into a tangle of sorts. We know we can connect Murray's costume manor to R&D, and we know we can connect these help-wanted recreation rooms to R&D. So what if we took the next step and tried to connect Murray's costume manor to the help-wanted recreation rooms? We needed proof, some final thread to tie all that stuff together. And we got it. In each of these help-wanted recreation rooms that has a gift box, if you open that gift box, you will always get an item that shares one common theme: sun and moon. And that's no coincidence. If you've even glanced at Secret of the Mimic, you'll know that sun and moon are of incredible importance to that game and to the Murrays. Specifically, moon is tied to Edwin, sun is tied to Fiona, and eclipse is tied to David. So what does it mean? Why are these collectibles given to these rooms? Well, I think it means that the Murray family and the things they've created are somehow tied to FNAF VR. Because remember, these aren't like the rooms we've talked about thus far. They're not like the elevator or the White Tiger basement or the silo. They're not making use of leftover areas from old locations. These were built from the ground up, designed after a VR video game, not taken from real restaurants. They are mimicries of past set pieces, all tied together by a set of wires. These giant sets of black or black and white wires stick out like a sore thumb in Security Breach. They were called out by popular YouTubers like John from FNAF years ago, and nobody really knew what they meant. Just like everything else I've mentioned so far, the wires are primarily found in the basement, under the main pizzaplex area. They run down elevators, form archways over doors, and snake across the ceiling for fucking miles. Seriously, look how many there are. On a whim, Gibby and I decided to follow the wires, much like you would a pathfinding system in an RPG. The funny thing is, they actually turned out to be a pathfinding system. Yeah, if you follow these wires of doom, they will lead you directly to the aforementioned help-wanted recreation rooms. The sheer number of these wires makes me think they're very important to what's going on in the pizzaplex, and the fact that they're directly tied to the help-wanted rooms means they might be responsible for them, or at least correlated. But what exactly are these wires, and why would they be responsible for the recreation rooms? Well, that actually ties into our final mystery, but as a hint, set aside everything I've said about locations being copied over from Murray's, and just look at the Pizzaplex's set design. Imagery of the Murray family is everywhere in the Pizzaplex. Take Fazerblast, for example, which is quite near Roxy Raceway. Look up. On the ceiling, there's a giant moon hanging. Across the walls and in other places, you see a particularly designed star that you also see in the Storytime showroom for David Murray. In the Fazerblast lobby and throughout the actual game area, there's a set of rockets that are very similar to the one we saw in David's room in Secret of the Mimic. This whole area, replaying Security Breach after playing Secret of the Mimic, feels like it could have been one giant playset for David. And that's not all. Head over to Kid's Cove, where you'll find a giant sun on the ceiling, and under it, a statue of Foxy, but specifically Fiona's design of Foxy, with his pirate cloak, just like we see him in the puppet show section of Secret of the Mimic. Indeed, I think the design of much of the Pizzaplex, including the recreation rooms and almost everywhere else, is heavily inspired by the Murrays and the Mimic AI. and I'll expand on that thought soon. But for our next mystery, the locations I've shared with you so far aren't the only recreation locations. Yeah, there's more. Because next up, we have 2 locations that tie directly to Moon.exe. In Moon.exe, we enter a cave with a large waterfall and several glowing crystals. Then, upon assembling a statue of Eclipse, we're transported directly into Murray's costume manor. But this cave should seem familiar because it has a lot in common with the cave we found in Ruin, which has this giant waterfall, these glowing crystals, and that's found, of course, under Roxy Raceway, which I've said about 10 billion times now, is where the manor used to be. Just like in Moon.exe, if you go behind this waterfall, you'll find a box, which contains one of many pieces you need to assemble to progress the story. In Ruin, it's one of several Phas tokens you need to get Candy Cadet to tell his story. In Secret of the Mimic, it's one of Eclipse's limbs that you must put on the statue in order to get transported to Murray's costume manor. This cave has confused people for a couple years, but after Secret of the Mimic, it's looking like it's meant to represent Moon.exe, M2, or the Murrays specifically. Our other Moon.exe connection is a little looser, but in Monty Golf, there's this lone wooden cabin in the middle of the golf course. Remember how I said all the Help Wanted recreation rooms were linked to Murray's because they all contained Sun and Moon collectibles? Well, there's actually one of those here. If you go inside of this small wooden cabin, you'll collect the Tragedy Mask, which I instantly thought was pretty odd. In Moon.exe, there's a moment where we meet the Sun Witch in her wooden cabin, and after that interaction, we're gifted with the Owl Mask, which does represent the tragedy of David's death. So in both of these areas, we have wooden cabins where you're given a mask representative of tragedy. At this moment in time, though, I'm not sure what the in-universe reason for these rooms being here could be, or why there would be in-universe ties to Moon.exe at all in the pizzaplex. So if you have any ideas about that, this is a great time to like, subscribe, or give those thoughts in the comments below. Done? Good, because now we gotta move on to our 4th mystery. The Candy Cadet story from Ruin is a pretty tricky one. Up until now, we've all been saying that it's just representative of the events of the Ruin DLC itself. But thanks to some details in and around the cave we've been talking about, I think we can get closer to what it might actually be saying. See, remember how I mentioned that Phas token earlier? Well, the box it's in, and the box that all the others are in, share a common design. A design that only those boxes share. These gift boxes are exclusively tied to the Candy Cadet story. And what do they look like? Well, take a look. Boom. That's more Murray's costume manor imagery. First, with the stars that I've told you look just like the ones throughout Murray's costume manor, and also with the design of the box itself, which is incredibly reminiscent of the carpet design from Murray's costume manor, particularly the pattern shown in the teaser. Interesting. Speaking of all this, why don't we take that Candy Cadet story and see if we can relate it to Secret of the Mimic. The story tells of a mother catching a monster and locking it in the basement. Then one day, the mother leaves, and since it's been learning the mother's voice, the monster in the basement sings a lullaby. It does this either to lure the child down or to escape from the basement. Pause. Monster in the basement that sings a lullaby? That's just the moon from Secret of the Mimic. In Secret of the Mimic, there's literally a thing in the basement singing a lullaby in the voice of a boy's parent. That connection is airtight, especially the lullaby part. The only thing stopping me from saying this is a one-to-one connection to Secret of the Mimic is that the mother in the story catches the monster and locks it away, and it's implied that the monster is responsible for the boy's death after mimicking the mother. Which, I guess, if you try to apply that to Secret of the Mimic, would mean that M1 killed David. If that's not the case, this could also just be an allusion to how the Mimic first started copying people. It's giving the story of how it copied the mother, Fiona, for the first time. But all these callbacks and foreshadowing to this one game raises a question. Why? Why are all these things here? Who's building them, or else who's leaving them for us to find? Years ago, John from FNAF proposed his infamous theory that the pizzaplex is run by an evil Charlie virus. One of the pieces of evidence that he used were the giant black or black and white tendrils / wires spreading all throughout the pizzaplex, which look a lot like Nightmarionne's tentacles. Nightmarionne, who we also see in plushie form, littered throughout the pizzaplex. And in addition to the literal pizzaplex, the AR pizzaplex, and inside of actual video games. See behind this pillar in Princess Quest 4. And honestly, John was absolutely right. He just had the wrong name for the culprit. Because back when he made that theory, he couldn't have known what we know now. He couldn't have known about M1 in the games. He couldn't have known about Fiona. The truth is, those wires have nothing to do with Charlie. Looking back on the past 4 mysteries we've discussed, and how they all tie to the Murray's costume Manor, I'd say the wires are most likely to be the M1 program, to be F10 and 4. That's right, these wires snaking all throughout the pizzaplex will henceforth be known as the Fiona Wires of Doom. A branch of the Mimic AI is the one controlling the pizzaplex, just like in the Tales story, The Storyteller. And while Tales from the Pizzaplex isn't canon to the games, it does help us to understand what's going on here. In The Storyteller, the giant mimic tree is controlling various parts of the Pizzaplex. I think it's worth noting that The Storyteller is a tree. I think that imagery is significant because in that story, the Mimic AI is feeding into everything throughout the mall. The Mimic AI in that story is the roots of the entire Pizzaplex, feeding information into everything around it. Given that there's clearly a similar force in the game, causing these recreation rooms to pop up and causing the animatronics to act weird, I think from now on, we should stop looking at these wires as wires, but instead visualize them as a set of tree roots from which the Mimic AI is influencing everything in the mall. We even see a bunch of wires coming out of F10 and 4 at the end of Secret of the Mimic. I think this is a perfect explanation for what's happening, and it explains all the Murray's imagery I've mentioned so far. The thing running the show here is an AI that dates all the way back to the period when Murray's was up and running. It's Nightmarionne, Fiona, M1, the game's version of the Storyteller tree. The image of trees is very important to Security Breach and the Mimic saga as a whole. In Security Breach and Secret of the Mimic, there's one shot that keeps recurring. Kids and animatronics sitting under a giant tree. Different looking trees are prevalent in Security Breach's Princess Quest, a game that the Mimic AI is literally using to control Vanessa, alongside maybe Afton's Agony or something. In Princess Quest, you can run into a giant tree literally sticking out of the floor. And there's also one you can find on the headboard of the bed in Princess Quest 2. And in Princess Quest 4, the final confrontation against Glitchtrap, you see this tree right before you go fight him. The tree is there, half alive and half dead, with little puppet masks on either side, in the form of pillars with black agony tendrils sliding down them. This is very clearly Storyteller and Nightmarionne imagery all in one. We even find this area after we pass a Nightmarionne plush upstairs. A quick side note, we also see imagery of this tree and Nightmarionne being tied all the way back in FNAF World's Halloween Update 2, where when you talk to Nightmarionne, they say their code is being used for a spin-off game and then drops you on a hill that has one tree on the top. So more tree, hill, and Nightmarionne imagery. Also, that line about Nightmarionne's code being recycled for a spin-off game, if we are assuming that Nightmarionne is representative of the Mimic, which it is, this line could now be referring to Help Wanted. The Mimic's code is being recycled for Help Wanted, and that's why it will later recreate the rooms from Help Wanted in the pizzaplex, because it's been there before. And to top it all off, in Secret of the Mimic, in the New Game Plus ending, M1 is literally acting as a storyteller, telling a story to David to help soothe him. Everything I've said in this video, all the last 4 mysteries, the literal MCM locations, the possible recreations of MCM locations like the elevator, the imagery from David's playsets and toys, the recreations from areas in Help Wanted, an in-universe game that we know had the Mimic AI scanned into it, the strange way that Candy Cadet seems to know about the Murray arc and the Mimic, and the set pieces that are identical to the Moon.exe story beats. All of these callbacks to Murray's costume manor point us to an important fact. The pizzaplex is being run by M1, or F10N4. And if you'd like to know what her goal is in running the pizzaplex, you can click this video on screen that goes over what I think her master plan is for the entire saga, and particularly her plans with Gregory. You'll probably need some fuel to stay up that late. Good for you, because the channel is now partnered with G Fuel, and by using code TDREADS, you can get 20% off of any G Fuel orders. Go ahead and use the link in the top of the description. Thanks, bye.